Welcome to part 13 of 21. We are deep in the heart of the system now. Today we're talking about the ultimate trade. The Quran says God has purchased the lives of the believers. But what does that mean in a rationalist socioeconomic sense? Is this a contract for the hereafter or a blueprint for a perfect society right here?
Yeah, and that framing, it fundamentally changes how we approach these texts. Because if we treat this literature purely as this, like, a metaphysical contract.
Like a golden ticket?
Right, exactly. A ticket you just cash in after you die. If we do that, we completely miss the architectural blueprint for the society it's actually trying to build right now in the present tense.
I mean, imagine you're just standing in the middle of a desert.
Right.
It is punishingly, dangerously hot. And your community, your friends, your family, they're all marching off to face this massive existential threat.
Mm-hmm.
And you make a choice. You decide to just step back into the shade, you watch them walk into the furnace, and you actually laugh to yourself thinking you've outsmarted them.
Yeah.
But the text we are examining today argues that by stepping into that shade, you haven't saved yourself at all. You have essentially just set yourself on fire.
It's a powerful image.
It really is. So welcome back to the Deep Dive. You are sitting at the table with us today for a meticulous, really highly analytical exploration of a lecture originally delivered back in May 1987.
And the material we're decoding today focuses on verses 81 through 84 of Surah At-Tawbah. That's chapter 9 of the Quran.
Yeah, and our core mission today is to figure out what a high-performance society actually looks like according to this specific framework. We're stripping away centuries of traditional, ritualistic assumptions here.
We're putting on a completely different set of lenses.
Exactly. We're looking at social justice, behavioral economics, and deep human psychology.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the scenario I just described, that desert scenario, isn't hypothetical at all.
No, it's very real. It is the exact historical reality that triggers the philosophy we're about to discuss. We are looking at verse 81, and the language is just incredibly intense. It feels like a societal breaking point. So what was the catalyst for this specific passage?
Well, the catalyst is a moment of extreme crisis and mandatory mobilization.
Well,
Historically, this aligns with the expedition to Tabuk in the 7th century.
right.
And we really have to understand the physical and the psychological environment to grasp the weight of the text here. It is the height of summer. The heat in that region is not just uncomfortable, it's lethal.
Deadly, yeah.
And the journey ahead of them is vast, the resources are super thin, and the opposition they are marching out to face is a literal superpower of the time, the Byzantine Empire.
So it's a terrifying prospect.
Absolutely terrifying. And right in the middle of this massive societal stress test, this specific faction emerges. The text refers to them as the Munafiqun, or the hypocrites.
Okay.
And they make this highly calculated, rationalized decision to stay behind. But, and this is key, they go a step further. They don't just quietly bow out.
They don't just stay home.
Right. They actively run a demotivation campaign among the ranks. They go around telling others, do not go forth in the heat. They use the harsh physical environment as this, seemingly logical, convenient excuse to just abandon their collective responsibilities.
It's the classic free rider problem, but with literal life or death stakes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are essentially campaigning on cowardice, saying, it's a heat wave, are you crazy, stay in the shade, let the zealots go sweat it out.
Yeah.
And the Quranic response is famously, almost brutally sharp. It counters with, the fire of hell is much hotter. Now, I grew up hearing that read in a strictly literal sense.
Sure, like a physical pit of fire.
Exactly. A physical pit waiting for them after death. But the 1987 analysis takes us in a fascinating, deeply psychological direction. It forces us to look at the immediate consequences of that cowardice.
Right. It demands that we look at the human mind itself. The rationalist approach in this lecture points out that while the text might have metaphysical implications, its primary concern is the socio-psychological reality of the present.
So right now,
this fire is the immediate burning anxiety of living a hypocritical life. Let's just break down the mechanics of cognitive dissonance for a second.
okay, let's do it.
You are sitting in the shade. You know perfectly well that your community, your peers, the people you break bread with, are out there facing incredible hardship for a cause you publicly claim to support.
Yeah.
You have manufactured this excuse. So what does the human brain do in that scenario? It has to protect its own ego, right? It cannot admit I am a coward and a traitor because that realization is just psychologically devastating.
Right. The brain tries to convince you that you aren't a coward, you're just pragmatic. You're the smart one.
Exactly. It generates a defensive narrative.
Which perfectly explains that really unsettling detail in the text where it mentions that these hypocrites actually rejoice.
Yeah.
I mean, here's where it gets really interesting. They are sitting in their air-conditioned rooms, so to speak, laughing at the people doing the hard work.
Yeah, they think they've gamed the system.
Right. They think they pulled a fast one.
And that laughter, I mean, that is a known psychological defense mechanism. They have to laugh. They have to mock the people who left. Because if the people who left are heroes, well, then the people who stayed are villains.
Oh, wow.
So by mocking the collective struggle, they momentarily soothe their own internal dissonance. But this lecture points out that this is a psychological hell of its own making.
Because you can't keep that up.
No, you cannot lie to yourself forever. When a person makes a habit of dodging the collective struggle while watching others sacrifice, the temporary relief of the shade quickly turns into paranoia.
They start looking over their shoulder.
Exactly. They become consumed by the fear of being found out, the jealousy of the genuine bonds forming among those who struggle together, and just this slow, creeping realization of their own inadequacy.
The heat of their own hypocrisy.
Right. It becomes a psychological fire. It burns them from the inside out right now in this life.
It's the exhausting, burning heat of maintaining a fraud. And the lecture notes that this laughter has a very short shelf life. Verse 82 lays out the inevitable consequence, a lifetime of weeping.
Which makes sense.
I want you to think about how this dynamic plays out even in our modern lives. Anyone who has ever been part of a high-stakes team, whether that's a startup trying to launch a product or even just a complex group project in a university, you know this person.
Oh, absolutely.
There's always someone who dodges the work. They manufacture some excuse, they ghost the Slack channel, and they might even sit at the bar with another friend group, laughing about how they got away with doing absolutely nothing while their team pulled an all-nighter.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
But what is the long-term sociological result of that behavior?
The inevitable result is absolute social quarantine. Eventually, the project either succeeds or fails, the dust settles, and the truth of who actually put in the sweat equity is undeniable.
The receipts are there.
Exactly. The social fabric reacts like an immune system. That person who laughed in the shade faces profound isolation. They lose the trust of their peers. And more devastatingly, they are permanently cut off from the genuine camaraderie, that deep mutual respect that is only born in the crucible of shared struggle.
You can't fake that bond.
No, you can't. A society, especially a high-performance one, cannot sustain itself if it tolerates loopholes. If the system allows people to actively discourage work and then reap the benefits of the community's success, the entire engine just grinds to a halt.
It kills morale completely.
Yeah. The text is establishing a non-negotiable law of human organization here.
Which brings us to a harsh realization about the rules of the system, right?
Yeah.
You cannot piggyback on someone else's success. Let's say the expedition is victorious. They come back to the city. The hypocrites try to blend back into the crowd, patting everyone on the back, saying, "Hey, we were with you in spirit. We were cheering for you."
Oh, yeah. Thoughts and prayers.
Right. And the system's response is an uncompromising no. You didn't do the work. You don't get the reward. Your spirit didn't build the society. Your sweat does.
It's extremely pragmatic.
It is. And if we follow that logic, it forces a massive collision with a deeply entrenched cultural belief. Because if the system strictly demands your own effort, it completely invalidates the idea that someone else can do the moral heavy lifting for you.
Well, now we are entering the territory of transferable merit.
Yes, we are. The 1987 lecture spends a significant amount of time utterly dismantling the cultural practice known as easily sawab.
Which is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people.
It is. For those unfamiliar, this is the widespread practice of attempting to transfer the spiritual reward of your own good deeds to someone else, almost exclusively someone who has died.
Right.
People will read scripture, give money to charity or feed the poor, and then mentally or verbally route the points from those actions to a deceased relative's account. This lecture argues that this entire concept is fundamentally incompatible with the socioeconomic system the Quran is trying to build.
It is entirely incompatible because it violates the law of action, which the text refers to conceptually as makafat-i-amal.
Makafat-i-amal?
Yes. This is the foundational principle that every single action has an inescapable, individualized reaction. The results of your actions, the merit you build, the psychological growth you achieve, these are inextricably tied to your own consciousness and your own biology.
So you can't just hand it off.
No. Merit is strictly non-transferable. You cannot export your good deeds, and you certainly cannot import someone else's surplus righteousness to cover your own deficits.
The lecture uses a brilliant medical analogy here that really strips away all the mystical ambiguity.
It's one of my favorite parts.
Let's look at the biology of effort through the lens of preventive medicine. Suppose you decide to completely overhaul your lifestyle. You start eating perfectly balanced meals. You train at the gym 5 days a week. You regulate your sleep. You take all your preventive medicines. The biological result is that you get healthy. Your cardiovascular system improves. Now imagine someone you love deeply. Your sibling, your best friend, falls terribly ill due to years of neglecting their own health. You feel an intense, desperate desire to help them.
Naturally.
But no matter how much you love them, you cannot walk into their hospital room, hook up a metaphysical IV drip, and transfer your cardiovascular health into their body.
Because biological laws just do not respond to good intentions. You can sit by their bed, you can pay for their treatment, you can provide immense psychological support. But the actual state of their biology is the cumulative result of their actions and their environment, just as your health is the result of yours. The author of this lecture argues that the moral, psychological, and socioeconomic laws of the universe operate with the exact same unyielding precision.
It's cause and effect.
Exactly. The idea that you can bypass the mechanism of cause and effect through a ritualistic transfer of merit is a comforting illusion, but it is an illusion nonetheless.
The author then takes this concept and applies a layer of sharp, almost satirical critique. He uses the post office analogy to demonstrate how bureaucratic and absurd the cultural view of merit has really become.
It's a very pointed critique of how organized religion often devolves into transactional bureaucracy. The lecture points out that people have begun to treat the universe like a giant cosmic postal service.
Like FedEx for prayers.
Literally. They genuinely believe they can bundle up a specific quantity of good deeds, say, reciting a specific verse 10,000 times, or donating a fixed sum of money, put it in a spiritual envelope, slap a stamp on it, and hand it over to the Postmaster General, expecting the divine mechanism to seamlessly route that package to their great-grandfather's account in the afterlife.
It's the ultimate gamification of spirituality. People are showing up to the cosmic post office with ledgers like, I've accumulated 50,000 recitation points this week. Please forward 20,000 to my late mother, 10,000 to my uncle, and I'll keep the rest in my own checking account.
And the lecture states unequivocally, there is no such post office in the fabric of the universe. It simply does not exist.
The universe doesn't take the mail.
It does not accept or process these parcels. If you perform a genuinely good deed, if you build a hospital, if you educate a child, if you feed someone who is starving, the psychological growth, the societal benefit, and the moral elevation accrue to you and to the immediate environment you just improved.
Right.
The energy of that action doesn't travel through some magical ether to retroactively alter the status of a person whose time for action has permanently ended.
Okay, I have to pause here and push back on this, just playing the devil's advocate for a moment.
Sure.
I can easily hear someone listening to this thinking, but wait, this framework sounds incredibly cold. It sounds almost aggressively unfeeling. Because human nature wants to help loved ones who have passed.
Of course it does.
Grief is a powerful physical pain. The desire to do something tangible for them is universal. So to build a system that looks a grieving person in the eye and says, sorry, your actions do absolutely nothing for them, doesn't that feel devoid of basic human empathy?
I get that. It is a very natural emotional reaction to feel that way. But if we pull back and look at the macro architecture of what this system is trying to build, it is not cold at all. It is the ultimate uncompromising expression of justice.
How so?
We have to follow the logic to its inevitable conclusion. If merit could be transferred, it would instantly destroy the core incentive for personal responsibility and societal progress.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Imagine a society where merit is a transferable currency. Why would a wealthy or powerful person ever strive to be just or suffer the hardships of building a high-performance society if they firmly believe they could just leave behind a massive endowment?
They could just buy their way out.
Exactly. They could fund generations of descendants or priests to endlessly recite prayers and give charity on their behalf, effectively buying their way out of their own hypocrisy after the fact. It would create a spiritual oligarchy.
The rich could monopolize righteousness even in death.
Yes. And the text violently rejects this. It rejects any concept of atonement where someone else carries your burden or where you can inherit someone else's spiritual wealth. The foundational rule of this socioeconomic blueprint is ironclad and deeply egalitarian. You only get what you, yourself, strive for.
Wow. Okay, so synthesizing this, if we accept that we agree that there are no free rides, no cheat codes, no spiritual trust funds you can inherit from your pious ancestors, it brings up a massive operational question.
Okay.
If no one can do the work for me, and I have to put in the grueling work myself, what is the mechanism that keeps this whole system from just burning people out? How does a high-performance society actually motivate its citizens day in and day out?
To understand the engine of that motivation, we really have to explore the central thesis of our discussion today, the ultimate trade.
Right, the title of the episode.
Exactly. The lecture draws attention to the Quranic assertion that the believers have sold their lives and their wealth to the system. They have engaged in a transaction. They surrender their resources, their time, and their effort to the collective good. And in return, the result they are guaranteed is Jannah.
Jannah, which is traditionally translated as paradise or heaven.
Yes, but the 1987 analysis completely reframes this. In this rationalist socioeconomic framework, Jannah is not merely a posthumous amusement park.
It's not just clouds and rivers after you die.
No, it is not just a lush garden you wake up in after you die, assuming your ledger of good deeds outweighs your bad. Jannah is defined here as the result, the emergent property of a high-performance society functioning optimally right here on Earth.
A blueprint for right now.
Right. When a society achieves perfect equity, when resources are distributed justly, when every individual is contributing their absolute best and is protected from exploitation, the state of living in that society is the manifestation of Jannah.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly. If I am an individual citizen in this framework, I am trading my life, my creative energy, and my wealth to the state or the community. Now, in a purely capitalist system, my motivation is monetary profit.
Right.
In a purely authoritarian system, my motivation is fear of the gulag. If Jannah is the macro result of the society, what is the microcurrency? What am I getting paid on a Tuesday afternoon to keep me going?
That is the perfect question. The lecture introduces a concept it calls psychological income.
Psychological income.
This is perhaps the most profound linguistic and sociological reevaluation in the entire lecture. A high-performance society cannot run on physical resources alone. It requires a constant, sustainable flow of psychological income to prevent burnout.
Okay, how does it generate that?
To explain this, the author dissects the Arabic word salat.
Okay, the prayer.
Right. For centuries, salat has been translated almost exclusively as the physical, ritualistic prayer performed 5 times a day, but the lecture points out a crucial linguistic nuance. When the word salat is combined with the preposition Allah, which means upon, it completely shifts the meaning.
So it doesn't mean praying over someone.
No, it does not mean performing a ritual over someone. Salat Allah means providing appreciation, moral support, and deep, validating encouragement.
Wow. That completely rewires the power dynamics of the community.
It really does.
So when individuals bring their hard-earned contributions to the collective, let's say a farmer brings their harvest, a teacher brings their curriculum, an engineer brings a new irrigation design, the leadership representing the system is commanded by the text to give them salat Allah.
Yes.
They aren't commanded to just stamp a receipt. The leader must actively appreciate them, elevate their status in the eyes of the community, and validate the specific effort they put in.
Precisely. And this isn't just about saying, good job. The system is engineered to provide what the Arabic text calls tazkiyah, which the lecture translates as psychological cleansing and growth.
Cleansing of what?
Of anxiety. Think about the human condition. When you pour your soul into a project, you are vulnerable. You carry anxiety. Did I do enough? Is my work valuable? Am I secure in my standing here?
Oh, definitely. Imposter syndrome is real.
Exactly. When the leadership and the community at large responds with genuine institutionalized appreciation, it acts as a solvent. It washes away those anxieties. It provides a profound sense of psychological security, which is the absolute prerequisite for people to engage in what the author terms creative effort.
The distinction the lecture makes regarding creative effort versus mere survival is fascinating, especially when it touches on the philosophy of social justice.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it redefines social justice entirely. In many modern political frameworks, social justice is often reduced to flat economic equality, the idea that everyone gets the exact same ration of resources regardless of their input.
Right.
The framework we are studying argues that true social justice is about the rigorous recognition and rewarding of merit and creative effort. The author makes a stark philosophical observation here. Animals merely procreate and survive. They replicate biological patterns.
Right? They just exist.
But human beings possess a spark of the divine, and that spark is specifically located in our ability to create, to innovate, to synthesize new ideas, to build complex systems, to write, to invent.
Yeah.
A societal system that merely feeds its citizens but fails to recognize, appreciate, and validate their creative effort is fundamentally oppressive. It starves the human spirit even if the stomach is full.
I want everyone listening to ground this in their own reality. Think about your own career. Think about a specific moment when a mentor, a senior manager, or someone you deeply respected pulled you aside and offered you a highly specific, genuine word of appreciation for a grueling piece of work you delivered.
That feeling is unmatched.
That isn't just a compliment. That is psychological income. That single interaction can fuel your motivation for months. It clears away the imposter syndrome. Now scale that up. Imagine an entire society built structurally on that exact principle.
It's hard to even fathom.
A society where mutual active appreciation is not just a management buzzword in an HR manual, but the foundational, legally mandated law of the land. That is the engine of a high-performance society.
It's a total paradigm shift. When you read the text with this understanding, a command like take from their wealth a charity and offer salat upon them is no longer a ritualistic transaction.
It's not a tax collection with a quick prayer.
No, it is the institutionalization of moral support. It is the Constitution commanding the leadership. When your citizens give you their resources, you must build an environment where they feel seen, fiercely valued, and psychologically bulletproof so they can return to their lives and unleash even more of their creative potential.
But introducing this definition of Salat Allah as active support, appreciation, and backing creates a massive collision with centuries of cultural tradition.
It absolutely does.
Because if Salat Allah means rolling up your sleeves and providing active backing, what happens to the way hundreds of millions of people traditionally understand sending blessings upon the Prophet? This isn't just some small cultural detail we're talking about. This is a foundational daily practice.
Yeah, and it leads us directly to one of the most famous verses in the Quran, chapter 33, verse 56. This verse explicitly states that God and his angels send salat upon the Prophet, and it commands the believers to do the exact same thing.
Right, and for context, the traditional interpretation of this command is that believers must constantly recite verbal blessings, a practice culturally referred to as sending durood.
And the 1987 analysis deconstructs this entirely, starting with the linguistics. It points out a really interesting historical irony. Durood is not even an Arabic word.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it is a Persian word, specifically rooted in ancient Pahlavi.
Ugh.
Over centuries of imperial and cultural shifts, the profound, action-oriented Arabic command of Salat Allah was filtered through Persian cultural lenses and narrowed down to mean murmuring, repetitive, verbal praises. The framework argues that we have essentially traded an engine for a lullaby.
Okay, let's rebuild the engine then. If Salat Allah doesn't mean just murmuring words of praise, what does it practically mean when the text says that God and the angels send salat upon the Prophet?
Well, in the rationalist framework of this lecture, God and the angels are not seen as anthropomorphic figures sitting in the clouds chanting praises.
Right.
They represent the immutable universal laws and the cosmic forces of cause and effect. Therefore, for the universe to send salat upon the Prophet means that the fundamental laws of nature, sociology, and economics are actively backing, supporting, and guaranteeing the ultimate success of his mission.
And we really must define that mission clearly. According to the text, the mission is not to establish a new set of rituals.
No.
The mission is to take humanity out of darkness, which is defined as oppressive, exploitative, pharaonic systems where humans subjugate other humans and bring them into the light, which is the equitable, justice-driven, high-performance society we've been outlining this whole time.
Spot on. So when the verse pivots and commands the believers, Sadu alihi wa salimu taslima, it's absolutely not a command to sit in a quiet room with a string of beads and recite phrase 10,000 times.
It's an engine.
It is a massive societal call to action. It translates to give your full, uncompromising obedience to this system, actively support the mission, put your wealth, your intellect, and your physical labor into ensuring this society succeeds.
The author uses a metaphor here that is just impossible to forget. He suggests that for 1,400 years, a vast portion of the population has been trying to push a car that has no engine.
It's a brilliant metaphor.
Let's really flesh out that car metaphor because it perfectly captures the absurdity of the cultural drift here. Imagine a society as a vehicle. The chassis is the legal system, the wheels are the economy, but the engine, the thing that actually creates forward momentum, is human creative effort.
Yes. And what the lecture argues is that people have taken the engine out. They sit inside the stationary vehicle, gripping the steering wheel, and they chant millions upon millions of verbal blessings.
Like it's a magic trick.
Right. They treat the words drive, drive, drive as a magical spell. They genuinely expect the society to miraculously fix its poverty, its corruption, and its inequities just because they are reciting the right syllables with enough devotion.
But the car isn't moving.
Because there is no mechanical transfer of energy to the wheels. And while they sit inside reciting their mantras, actual, tangible, oppressive darkness continues to spread outside the car.
So what does this all mean? It's the ultimate abdication of responsibility disguised as piety. Repeating a magical incantation like things will get better, peace be upon him, society will heal, for decades, doesn't fix a broken education system. It doesn't build hospitals.
No.
It doesn't stop corruption. You actually have to build the engine. You have to endure the friction of social change.
And the author is ruthless on this point. He argues that verbal praise without practical action is an illusion. It is a way for people to feel they're contributing to the mission without having to endure any of the heat or the hardship we discussed back in verse 81.
I can imagine someone listening to this analysis and feeling really defensive, thinking, wait, is this lecture suggesting we shouldn't respect or praise the prophet? Is it anti-praise?
Not at all. The author clarifies this emphatically. The argument is about the definition of true respect.
Okay.
If someone dedicates their life to finding the cure for a disease and they ask for your help, what is the highest form of respect you can show them? Is it writing a song about how great they are while they work alone in the lab?
Obviously not.
Or is it putting on a coat, walking into the lab, and helping them run the experiments? The lecture argues that true respect for the prophet is rolling up your sleeves, facing the inevitable backlash from the status quo, and continuing the exhausting physical and intellectual work of his mission.
Doing the actual work.
Yes. To say you deeply love and support someone's mission but refuse to do any of the actual heavy lifting is intellectually dishonest. True salat, true appreciation, must be embodied in action.
It's the stark difference between sending a thoughts and prayers tweet after a disaster versus actually showing up to the rubble with a shovel to help dig people out.
The system demands that you show up with a shovel.
But this brings us to a really fascinating sociological crossroads. If society is a machine powered by psychological income, what do you do with the broken cogs? What happens to the people who actively try to jam the gears?
The hypocrites.
Right, let's go back to the hypocrites from the beginning of our deep dive. The ones who stayed in the shade, laughed at the workers, and dodged the ultimate trade. What happens when they eventually reach the end of their lives? The text prescribes a very specific, almost shocking social quarantine for them in verse 84.
Yeah, verse 84 delivers a definitive command to the leadership of this society. It explicitly forbids them from praying over the hypocrites when they die and commands them never to stand at their graves.
To a modern ear, heavily conditioned by social etiquette, refusing to attend a funeral sounds incredibly harsh, almost petty. It violates our basic sense of polite society.
It does. But to understand this, we have to separate basic human decency from societal endorsement.
What's the difference in this context?
The lecture is very clear. Funerals, burial, and shrouding are essential, non-negotiable social customs. You do not disrespect the dead body. You afford it the basic dignity required by human nature. However, the specific phrase, standing at the grave, carries a much deeper sociological weight in this framework.
It's not just attending.
No, it signifies offering posthumous praise. It means the leadership standing up in front of the community, offering a eulogy, and bearing official witness to a life well lived.
And the entire point of a eulogy in a high-performance society is to signal to the living what behaviors are valued.
Well.
But the hypocrites haven't lived a life that benefits the community. They spent decades actively avoiding the work.
Exactly. They spent their lives dodging the ultimate trade. They contributed zero creative effort to the high-performance society. In fact, they mocked the very people who were bleeding and sweating to build it.
They laughed in the shade.
Yeah. Right. Therefore, they have earned zero psychological income, both in life and in death. Think about the catastrophic damage it would do to the societal engine if the leader stood at the grave of a known hypocrite and invented polite lies about how dedicated and wonderful they were.
It would completely degrade the concept of merit. If I am a citizen who has sacrificed my wealth and health for the community, and I see the leader giving the exact same glowing eulogy to the guy who spent his life dodging the work and laughing in the shade, the system collapses in my mind.
Why try?
Exactly. Why would anyone ever strive if the societal reward, the ultimate validation, is distributed equally to the heroes and the cowards just to be polite?
What's fascinating here is how the author connects this strict rule to a broader, absolutely vital Quranic principle found in chapter 13, verse 17.
Which is?
It is the fundamental rule of survival for human history. Only that which benefits humanity endures. Societies do not build lasting monuments to consumers. They build monuments to creators. Because the hypocrites leave behind no lasting, tangible benefit, their memory is permitted to simply wash away. The text uses a beautiful, stark imagery for this. They are like the useless foam that gathers on the surface of a rushing river.
The foam just disappears.
The foam eventually vanishes, while the pure water that nourishes the earth remains.
The lecture quotes a piece of poetry to illustrate this point, and it completely floored me when I read it. The line is, "My death is a test of the sincerity of your lamentation."
So profound.
Let's unpack that. If you lived a truly beneficial life, if your creative effort actually elevated the people around you, your companions will not need a forced, ritualistic, state-mandated gathering to praise you.
No, they won't.
Their genuine grief, the agonizing void your absence leaves in the machinery of society, and their fierce, relentless dedication to continuing your mission. That will be your true praise. Your legacy isn't an etched stone, it's the fact that the engine keeps running because of what you built.
It is the ultimate posthumous audit. In this framework, your legacy is never defined by the polite social obligations of your funeral. It is measured entirely by the tangible, enduring impact of your creative effort on the high-performance society.
Think about the modern funerals we all attend. How often do we stand in a room, dressed in black, praising people simply out of suffocating social obligation?
Almost always.
We stand at the podium and say they were great and generous, even if every single person in the room knows they were selfish, exploitative, or lazy, simply because it's the polite thing to do.
We do.
This ancient text is demanding absolute, uncompromising integrity. Praise must be earned. Merit is mathematically real, and it can only be achieved through tangible, sweating contributions to the forward momentum of humanity.
It forces a total, systemic reevaluation of what we consider a successful life. You cannot buy your way into it, and you cannot fake your way through it.
It really does.
Yeah.
So let's step back and synthesize the massive journey we've been on today. We set out to decode the ultimate trade. What we found is that it is absolutely not a magical metaphysical transaction where you can sit in the shade, mail your good deeds to the dead via some cosmic post office, and wait for paradise.
Not even close.
Instead, it is the rigorous, beautiful, and relentlessly demanding construction of a high-performance society. It's an ecosystem where every individual's creative effort is backed and fueled by the psychological income of mutual appreciation. True solid. It's a world where true blessings are not murmured syllables in a dark room, but the rolling up of sleeves to physically push humanity from the darkness of exploitation into the light of justice.
And it leaves every one of us with a highly critical lens through which to view our own modern world. I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. Look around at the statues we build in our city squares. Look at the celebrities we worship on our screens. Look at the people we give our grandest eulogies to. Are we offering our societal salat, our ultimate appreciation, our finite attention, and our immense resources to the people who are actually moving humanity forward through silent, creative effort? Or are we as a society just endlessly standing at the graves of hypocrites who dodged the real work?
That changes everything about how we view societal contribution. It's a complete paradigm shift that demands we audit our own lives. But it also leaves us with a burning, almost uncomfortable question.
It does.
If merit is entirely individual, there are absolutely no free rides. And if the hypocrites who dodge the work are completely brutally ostracized from the community, how does this high-performance system handle those who genuinely want to contribute but are physically or financially broken? What happens to the sick, the deeply impoverished, and the weak? Are they just left behind as acceptable casualties in this relentless pursuit of progress? We will find out next time as we dive into the next set of verses and see exactly how this system attempts to balance rigorous, uncompromising merit with profound compassion. Until then, keep digging deeper.